Has your four-wheel drive ever had overheating issues? Well, mine has them too, and to be honest, I've got no idea what is causing it.
A little bit yucky.
See that coming out of the bottom corner? Pretty gross. So today, we're taking a deep dive into my cooling system, cleaning, servicing, and replacing parts until we can get this old patrol running cool once and for all. So to begin with our cooling system overhaul, we're gonna be going deep into the engine, I mean. So let's start ripping this thing apart.
Now, you might be thinking to yourself, a TD42 with overheating problems, don't they all do that? Well, if you've spent enough time on the Toyota Facebook pages, I'm sure that's what you've been led to believe. But believe it or not, the TD42, when maintained correctly, will run nice and cool just like any good engine should. So with that, let's have a look at the first major component of our cooling system.
All right, so there's our water pump, and this is what's responsible for pushing coolant all around your coolant system. Now, this is a genuine pump that I actually replaced about 4 years ago, so my one is actually still in good nick. These can and do wear out, however, that's why I replaced it last time. And there's actually a little hole on the bottom side here that when this seal or bearing eventually lets go after a long time, it'll start weeping out of here, and that's how you know that your pump's had it and you gotta get a new one. Now, one thing that's often overlooked about your water pump is that it's actually designed very precisely, as you can imagine, to fit against your engine block so that it pushes coolant as efficiently as possible. Now, something that's very critical to these pumps is that the way they're designed and the way that this impeller pushes coolant is that it has to sit very close to this face here in order to push coolant efficiently and not form any cavitation. Now, in order to not have that cavitation form in the coolant, you want a nice surface, obviously, on your impeller, as well as the face that it's meeting up against. And often what is the sort of problem in these TD42s is that this face in the timing cover can actually start to corrode and become pitted. And as you can imagine, that creates a gap between the impeller and that surface, and that's where cavitation or bubbles are gonna form, and so your car doesn't push coolant as efficiently around the system as it should. Now, if you look at my timing cover here, there is a bit of pitting on this face here, and that's what's gonna cause that cavitation as the impeller's spinning around here. There's a gap between the surfaces, and that's bad for coolant flow. Yeah, and this is pretty common for TD42s to start seeing this after a period of time. So like me, you're probably thinking, well, if that's pitted, ideally you don't want that. It needs to be replaced. And I have heard of people, you know, fixing up some of that pitting with like JB Weld and stuff and sanding it back, or like me in the past when I replaced it, I just threw the pump back on, but ideally it needs to be replaced. Now, replacing the timing cover is a much bigger job than what I've just done getting down to the pump, but it can be done. And normally, I probably would just stick the pump on and, you know, send it and see it's all right, but there is another issue that I have with the donkey. Now, you might have heard earlier that I mentioned I do actually have a sort of annoying coolant leak coming from the block, and it's actually coming from behind this very timing cover, more specifically between the block and the back of the timing cover where the sandwich plate sits. Unfortunately, that means the timing cover and everything else in front of it has to come off so we can fix it. These are a pretty nifty tool the King Cramp's just come out with. They are for removing hoses. So they've got a point on the end, and you can shove that in between the barb and the hose when they're like really crusty, and you shove it in there and loosen it and they come off easy.
Now, annoying as this job is, I am interested to port all apart so I can inspect the condition of my coolant system.
A little bit yucky, but that's all right.
All right, now potentially the hardest sort of bit about pulling the timing cover off is that you do have to pull the harmonic balancer off the front to be able to get it off. So you got to undo the harmonic balancer nut on the end of the crankshaft. And these are, I can't remember what the torque spec on these is, but it's like a few hundred newton meters, I think. It's bloody, they're tight. So I've turned the motor over to top dead center so that we know our gears are in the right position, because we will have to take them off, so we want them sitting where they should be. And now I've actually gone and got, this is a 3/4 inch breaker bar, so big drive on the head, and I got an extension, and I got the car in gear, and we're gonna try crack this nut. So, see how it goes.
Now, I'm guessing there's a good chance this harmonic balancer has never been removed before, so we'll see how easy it is to get this nut off.
Oh, that wasn't too hard. Hey, that cracked pretty easy. Happy about that. So to get the harmonic balancer off, you might think that you actually have to sort of apply pressure pulling wise to get it off, but these actually use a cone washer behind the nut, which has a chamfered sort of edge or an angled edge. And that means that the harder you try and pull on it, if it's not like, the harder you try and pull on it, the tighter it gets. So you've actually got to pop these off by hitting it the other way and sort of shock that cone washer loose to get the harmonic balancer to pop off. The hardest thing usually is that you don't have a lot of space to swing the hammer to get a good hit on it.
Now, removing the harmonic balancer and the cone washer is notoriously difficult on a TD42. Just hitting it with a hammer often isn't enough, and you'll have to resort to other techniques like heating it up with the oxy so that it can expand a bit and hopefully come free.
Oh, I just saw it move. It's moving. It's moving. Oh, I think it's gonna go. Yeah. Oh. So that's the cone washer, and there's the key in the top. Oh, there it is. Far out. I'm glad that came off. Like, that required quite a bit of hitting, and in the end it was heat from the oxy that made it come off. So yeah, that's our harmonic balancer off, which means we can now get to the rest of the timing cover and actually pull it off. So stoked.
Now, the timing cover is held on with a bunch of bolts both in the face and through the sump, so we've got to make sure that we get them all off.
Now this is the kind of scary bit where I'm pretty sure I've undone everything on the timing cover, so it should come off. It is held on via like adhesive or like gasket sealer, so it might make it a bit sticky, but I don't really know where to start by pulling it off.
Now, I'm tipping that this timing cover has never been separated from this engine, and hence why it was probably so difficult to take off. It probably also didn't help that I did accidentally leave one of the bolts in there, but after sorting that out, I was able to wiggle it off.
There's our timing cover. Far out, that was a bit of an effort, I'm not gonna lie.
With our timing cover removed, we can now see our timing gears. It's also already pretty apparent as to why we have a coolant leak. I can see quite a bit of corrosion formed around those coolant ports. But we're not quite all the way to our leak just yet. We do have to remove our timing gears. First to go is the injector pump gear, carefully followed by our idler gear and then our cam gear. Last to come off now is the sandwich plate. Now this is only held to the block via a paper gasket, so should come off a little bit more easy.
And there is our sandwich plate, behind which all our problems lie. So you can see on the back side of this sandwich plate, that's where our leak was coming from, just in there. Obviously the gasket or whatever's worn out, and it was leaking to the outside world. So at least in doing this, we're going to be able to fix that leak, replace all that, but we've got a bit of cleaning up to do. It's pretty grubby. All right, so with everything apart and laying out, the next job is always the fun job, and that's cleaning everything up. You want to make sure you do this properly. It's probably the most important part of the job, because if it goes back dirty, your gaskets aren't going to seal and you'll be pulling the whole thing apart again, which we don't want. So I'm going to spend a bit of time today cleaning everything up. We do have some new components to go in, but yeah, we're going to do our best to clean everything, then we can reassemble.
Now, perhaps the hardest part to clean was the mating surface for this backing plate. I want to make sure to get it absolutely spotless so that I don't have any future problems with leaks. Now, the surface on the face of the block was a little bit difficult to get to, and I quickly realized that all of the stuff I was scraping off was inevitably falling into the sump. Now, we certainly don't want to risk material falling into the sump and then potentially blocking the pickup. So even though it was a bit of extra work, I decided to take the sump off.
That's a sump out of the car, which hopefully should make my life a little bit easier when it comes to cleaning the front of this, and will make sure that it's all done properly and we don't have any bad bits floating around in the engine to get sucked up. So let's continue cleaning.
So after many hours of scraping, scrubbing and cleaning, I think we've got everything cleaned up pretty good and are just about ready to throw it all back together.
Well, I've spent the better part of today just cleaning up all of these bits. Like, that's just, yeah, it's the most critical part, as I've mentioned many times before. But anyway, I think we're at the stage where all the stuff for the timing cover, all the gears and stuff is all clean, and I think I can start putting that back together. So yeah, we've got some new stuff from Patrol Apart, gaskets, bits and pieces that I'll run you through. But yeah, I'm keen to see this thing come back together finally.
The gasket that goes between the sandwich plate and the block is a paper gasket, but I'm using Permatex on both sides just to make sure it all seals up properly. As an extra precaution, I'm also adding some RTV sealant just around the coolant ports where we had our leak prior. This is going to make sure that those seal up properly and don't leak again. After bolting on our sandwich plate and torquing all the bolts to the correct spec, we're ready to throw our timing gears back on, torque them to spec, and then we're ready for some brand new shining bits, which I'm pretty keen for.
So this is a brand new, genuine Nissan timing cover from Patrol Apart. They have these things on the shelf, which is bloody awesome. And this is what I really wanted to replace, as well as fixing that coolant leak, which we've now done. And the main reason being, this is where our water pump sits, just up here, and you'll see that the jacket inside here is nice and factory finished. It's not corroded and pitted out. It's nice and smooth, which is going to be perfect for our optimum water flow with our pump. Aside from that, it looks flush as, obviously. It's got all nice new clean surfaces, which makes it really good for sealing. And yeah, we'll bang some new seals in here. I do have a new front main seal to go in, as well as my O-rings for where the thermostat goes, as well as where the water jackets go back into the block. So yeah, we'll bang those in and we can get it fitted up.
Unlike the other side of the sandwich plate, the timing cover is sealed from factory using an RTV sealant. Now there are quite a few surfaces on the timing cover that need to be sealed with sealant, so make sure you get them all or else you'll get leaks. With the timing cover now all torqued up, the next step to sealing off the engine was to refit my sump. I've got a new gasket from Patrol Apart and I'm making sure to clean it up proper so we get a good seal and no leaks.
So with our new timing cover on, the next to go on is our water pump. Now, I talked about the importance of having the impeller sitting nice and close against the timing cover earlier on. Now, what you can do, particularly with the TD42s, if you've got genuine pump and timing cover, it's not so much of an issue, but it is still something you can check. You can actually check the clearance between the impeller and the timing cover to get as small of a gap, effectively as possible. So I actually have two gaskets, so I'm gonna chuck it on dry first and test the clearance, and then you can chuck it on with one gasket, two gaskets, and you're looking for about 1 mil of clearance. So I've just put the water pump on with no gasket, and already I can tell that's spinning freely. I can't hear any contacting of the impeller on the timing case, but we'll pull it off and double check. But if that's the case, then I'll just use some Permatex aviation sealer, and then that'll be the perfect clearance for the perfect water flow.
Now, I forgot to mention here that the best way to check that clearance from the impeller to the timing cover face is to use a bit of blue tack on the edge of the impeller, stick it on there, and then pull it back off and measure the thickness of the blue tack.
All right, ready for our harmonic balancer to go back on. But yeah, and then the fun job's gonna be tightening it up because the nut on the end of the crank to hold this on is bloody tight. Now the torque spec for the nut is 320 Newton meters. Luckily, our torque wrench actually goes up to 340, so we'll be able to get it on this one. The hardest bit is going to be stopping the car or the engine from turning over. So I've got the car in first gear, I've got it chocked at the back wheels. 320, pretty much maxed out the torque wrench. Alrighty. Something tells me I'm not going to be able to pull this on my own. Weight of the car's on it now. Something's turning. Far out. Far out, that is tight. I think that's it. I'll do one more just to check. All right. So that's the timing cover on and the front of the engine pretty much back together. There is one other bit we need to do, and that leads me to this here, which is our thermostat housing. Now, the thermostat is a very important part of any engine and its cooling system. So here I have the upper and lower thermostat housing as I've pulled it out. But what we're gonna do, take this top thermostat housing off, that'll reveal our thermostat within, and then we'll talk about it. Now, when it comes to doing these thermostat housing bolts on a TD42, you actually have to be really careful because often is the case, these bolts actually will corrode, which means they can actually snap, particularly this long bolt right at the back. So you gotta be careful when you pull them out. So if we take this top thermostat housing off, you'll see in here, we have our thermostat. So what exactly is a thermostat? Well, it's basically a temperature controlled valve. In cars, it lets the engine warm up quickly to operating temp, and then it keeps it at that operating temp while it's running. Now, when you first start your car in the morning and it's cold, this valve will stay closed until your engine reaches operating temperature, or the coolant does. And then, being temperature controlled, this valve opens, letting the coolant through into the top hose and then through your radiator to cool back down. So it effectively just regulates the water temperature throughout your engine by opening and closing. Now, the problem with these things is that being a valve, like any valve, they can get stuck. Now, if it gets stuck closed or partially closed, it's going to prevent that coolant from flowing through into your radiator, and that's going to cause your engine to overheat pretty quickly, so you'll notice that straight away. On the opposite hand, if it gets stuck open, it'll mean that your car will always have that coolant flowing through this and into the radiator. So when you start it on a cold morning and it's trying to warm up, it's going to take a long time for your engine to get to operating temperature because this isn't restricting the water and it's letting it flow straight through to the radiator. Now, this thermostat I replaced 4 or 5 years ago, and it probably is still working, but while everything's apart, I'm going to replace it. So I have a new genuine Nissan thermostat from Patrol Apart. Now, another thing that Patrol Apart do, and this is sort of specific to the TD42s, but they do a bolt and gasket kit for the thermostat housing. So like I mentioned earlier, these thermostat housing bolts, they do start to corrode, rust, and you can break them inside. So they do a kit that has all new bolts for the upper and lower thermostat housing. So while we're at it, we can just put some fresh bolts in, and then we know the next time we go to pull it apart, it'll be sweet. Also, I recommend, which what I'll be doing is putting some sort of anti-seize on these bolts just to help prevent any corrosion.
After cleaning up all of the sealing faces, we can take our brand new 76-degree thermostat and install it with our gasket into the housing. Then I'm putting some Permatex on the other sealing faces before installing it back on the engine. Next, we're putting all of our drive belts back on, ready for the next component.
Next on the list, we have our fan and viscous hub or fan clutch. Now, first thing, the fan, pretty simple. It's responsible for pulling air through your radiator to cool down the coolant that's passing through it. Pretty straightforward. In terms of condition, mine is pretty old and they do start to go brittle. Mine has started developing a few cracks, which probably in a few waters crossings time is gonna make one of these blades fall off and shatter and probably take out my radiator in the process. So you want your fan to be new so that it's not going to split and crack from old age. Now the fan is attached to this viscous hub or fan clutch in the middle, and pretty much this thing's job is to control how fast and hard this fan actually spins to cool down your engine. Now, these viscous hubs are actually kind of complicated in their engineering, even though they're a small unit. They basically work on temperature. They have a fluid inside that is used to drive a set of plates on the inside to effectively lock the back driving flange and the rest of the fan. Now, this fluid, it loses and gains viscosity with temperature. So when this is cold, it is less viscous, and that means that there is an engagement between those plates, and your fan won't, like, it will still spin, but it won't turn as hard. It'll be a little bit more free, and that prevents as much air being pulled through your radiator, and that allows your engine to come up to running temperature. Now, when the engine does start getting warm, so does that fluid inside, and then as that fluid increases in viscosity, it is used to mesh these plates inside to effectively mesh the drive between this back driving plate and the rest of your fan, and that makes the fan spin harder, pull more air through, and bring the engine temperature back down. Now you can test if your viscous hub is working properly. When the engine's cold, you should be able to have a bit of free spin in it, and when it's warm, it should lock up and feel a lot tighter and obviously make the fan want to work harder. Now mine's not really doing any of them. Mine's very broken. What I noticed when I pulled it out of the car is that I believe that the fluid inside must have leaked out of the seal, and it's actually coated the back of the viscous hub here, and it's all oily and gross. And that's pretty much meant that now my driving flange and the thing, they're locked together. Like I cannot move them. And so pretty much what that's meant in the case of my car is this thing has been turning flat out, full stop. Now you might be thinking like me, if this thing's running all the time flat out, how's your engine gonna overheat? If anything, it won't get hot in the first place. So obviously this isn't the root of our overheating issues, but it also is a problem in that it by rights won't be letting the engine get warm. So we are gonna be replacing it. Now this here is a brand new viscous fan and hub, which I got from Patrol Apart. This is actually, I believe, a UFI, which is a performance sort of parts brand, United Fuel Injection. They make these as an aftermarket replacement for the standard one. Just looking at it straight away, I've never seen one of these before really, but it looks like the viscous hub maybe bigger, and you'll see that the fan design is actually different as well. The blades have a slightly different shape to them. I'm assuming that's to push more airflow, so I'll be curious to see how it works, but this one, unlike mine, is actually working as it should. So you see now that it's cold, the fan can stay still, and that plate at the bottom actually turns independently. And that's what you want when you've got a cold viscous hub. It's gonna mean this fan's not turning so hard on startup, and it's gonna allow your engine to get up to temperature. And then once it's warm, this will lock up more. So anyway, it looks bloody awesome. I'm keen to see it on the car, so yeah, we'll go install it. So the next big thing obviously is our radiator. Now this is like probably one of the most important things for keeping your car cool, and it can be often the culprit as to why your car might be having cooling issues. Now, what a radiator does, well, it's just a big heat exchanger. So your coolant passes in, usually through this top hose over here as it's come out of the thermostat. The hot water's come out of the thermostat. Then it travels through the radiator in tubes, and connecting those tubes in between are what we call the fins. Now, the fins are very, very fine bits of metal that are stuck between, and they're your heat exchange. So the air, as you're driving along or as your fan's running, is passing through those fins. That's why you can see through them, and that's taking the heat out of your coolant. Often is the case, the reason these things don't work as well as they should is because, like mine, they get very dirty. As soon as you've got dirt on the surface of where that heat exchange is meant to be happening, you're losing heating efficiency. So the best thing you can do instantly before you even consider getting a new radiator is giving this a good clean. So compressed airing out of the fins. Now you have to be careful when you're washing it. You don't use too high pressure air because you can fold the fins over and that'll stop air being able to pass through. Same when you're using cleaning with water. Don't get your gurney and jam it in there because you'll fold all the fins over and then it will be ruined. Won't work at all. Now, the other thing you can do is actually flush it out. Now, one thing to consider is when it's running in your car, the coolant's always flowing in one direction. So if there is debris or anything in your coolant system, it's gonna be passing in this way. And if it's gonna get caught, if it's too big to pass through the tubes, it will get caught on this side. So I like to reverse flush it with water. So flush it from the other end and then push what you can back out, hopefully through the tubes and then outside the end tank. Now, you can even go further. You actually take your radiator down to a radiator shop, and if the radiator itself, exterior, all in good nick, you can get them to take the end tanks off and they'll actually rod the tubes. So they'll get a big rod and they push through all of the sediment and crap out of the tubes and clean it right up, put your tanks back on, and then you pretty much got a brand new radiator. So one thing you gotta remember is that we live on a dirt road, so dust will get your radiator dirty quick as, but look at all the sediment. Look at all that. That was just sitting on the fins. And it doesn't look that clean, right? But you'd be surprised how much just having that coating of dust and dirt on the fins stops them from transferring heat efficiently. And then all of a sudden your radiator's not working like it should. Now, it's also worth mentioning that a lot of cars will have an air conditioning condenser sitting in front of their radiator, just like mine does. Now, you wanna make sure that this thing is clean, just like the radiator. Obviously, if this is blocked, it's gonna prevent any air passing through to your radiator, so make sure that's clean as well. Alrighty, so radiator. Put down in there. So with the radiator in, we just gotta go connect all the hoses.
Now make sure your coolant hoses are in good condition. They should be soft and malleable and not hard and brittle, otherwise they may split or leak.
Now there's a couple other important parts of your radiator. First off is your radiator cap. This is designed to let coolant overflow out of the radiator if the pressure builds above a certain point. So this is a 1.1 bar rated radiator cap. And if it does reach 1.1 bar, this will lift and it'll let coolant out into your overflow. Now, just as important as letting coolant out is allowing it to suck the coolant back in when the system cools and depressurizes. So for that, it's got the same thing on the bottom against a rubber seat like that. So you just want to make sure that those springs are working as they should and sealing properly, and that'll make sure the coolant can expand and contract when it needs to. And for the coolant that does go past your radiator cap to your overflow, you want to make sure that the control valve on top of your overflow bottle is flipped the right way. This is designed to let coolant in one way and out the other. And if it's flipped, it's not going to allow coolant to enter and exit the cooling system properly. So the last thing I want to talk about is air damming and directing airflow through your radiator. Now, all cars are designed in a way so that air pulled by your radiator fan, as well as air just flowing in through the front of the car, is designed to go through your radiator. Now, to achieve this, any incoming air is effectively blocked from going anywhere other than through the radiator. Now, in modern cars that are designed a little bit more efficiently than my old GQ, you'll see a lot more of the use of rubber and insulation to help direct airflow only through the radiator. Mine doesn't have that much of it. It does have a little bonnet flap here that seals against the top, and there is a little bit left over, like pinch weld around the radiator at the bottom, but it is missing a bit of it. And that obviously means that I do have gaps around the radiator, and they're all spaces that air that's coming through the front can then get let out and not pass through the cooling fins like we want it to. Now you can go around with rubber and insulation tape to try to seal up as best as possible, but I've actually got an even easier solution. This is actually an air dam from Patrol Apart. This is the Suited GQ, and it's actually a top cover that sits over the front and bridges the gap between the rad support and the radiator, and that's going to stop any air that's coming in through being able to exit up through the top. It's all going to have to be forced through the radiator. So this is a really neat bit of kit that they make themselves. It's aluminium, it's all pressed, folded, CNC cut. So yeah, it's very nice and neat. So yeah, we'll chuck it in. Oh, look at that, what a fit. This too. All right, that's Mick. That looks so good. So that top air dam is now in there and it looks really good. Now, the more common form of air damming that you'll see from standard in all cars is of course your radiator and fan shroud. Now, the purpose of this is to shroud around your radiator fan and your radiator all around the perimeter of it so that your fan is forced to suck air only through the radiator. You don't want it sucking in air from behind or from the side, and that's the purpose of this shroud, to direct where the fan can actually pull air from through your radiator. Now, my old radiator shroud, it was pretty old and it was actually missing this bottom section which shrouds around the base of the fan to stop it from sucking in from underneath. So I've picked up a new aftermarket replacement from Patrol Apart, and that's gonna fit straight onto my radiator. But yeah, this is a big one, so don't forget about it. Oof. Bit of a tight squeeze with my new big fan, but she's in. So we've got our whole cooling system now back together. It's all looking really good. We're just about ready to put some coolant in, but I'm gonna do one more extra step first. Now, when I had the timing cover off, you might have been able to see that inside of the head and some of the other water jackets, as well as evident on the timing cover itself, that there was a bit of corrosion and rust and grime and, you know, yucky stuff built up inside the cooling system. Now, seeing discoloration and a bit of corrosion and gummy stuff inside your cooling system isn't uncommon for a car that's this old and done this many Ks, but just because it's not uncommon to see it doesn't mean that it's any good for your cooling system, and it should be addressed if possible. Now, ideally, the only way to fully, truly clean and get rid of all that gum inside of all of the coolant ports and jackets right throughout your engine block and head is to actually take the components to get acid dipped, I believe, where they literally drop the whole head and block inside a big bath with acid that gets rid of all that stuff. But obviously I'm not going to that extent. So the next best thing, and this is actually what I was recommended by the guys down at Patrol Apart, is to perform a radiator and coolant system flush using some special radiator flush fluid. Now, I've never actually used this stuff before, but I was recommended to use it, as I said, by the guys down at Patrol Apart, and this is going to hopefully help free up and get rid of some of that yucky stuff that we saw inside of my cooling system. Now, obviously, we don't want all that yucky stuff to just fly around my coolant system when it gets loosened, so we've got another little trick for that. Now, what I have here is a pair of ladies' stockings. Now, don't get too excited, they're not for me, but what these are going to do is going to help us catch any sediment that gets freed up in the cooling system by our radiator flush fluid. So Paul down at Patrol Apart, he said this is an old mechanics trick they used to do. You pretty much stick the stocking over the top radiator hose, which is where it comes out of your thermostat and then into your radiator. And this is going to act as a little net over the hose that's going to stop any sediment from then going into your radiator and potentially blocking it up from the inside. So we'll get one of these stuck onto the top radiator hose and then we can fill it up. So we'll get our stocking. Look at that, it's like a little net. And we're going to feed that over our radiator hose. Now, what Paul did say to me was when you do it, is make sure you leave a little bit of slack that sort of acts like a bulb that the sediment can collect in. So we're just going to sort of leave it like that. Stick our hose clamp back on and then push our radiator hose back on. Now, this stuff's pretty simple to use. First step, make sure you drain your cooling system completely. So obviously I've had the radiator out. I've also drained the block drain, which is at the back of the block, to get all of the coolant out of all of the galleries in the block and the head. And then when it's empty, pretty much all you have to do is add this stuff into your radiator system and fill the rest with water. And then we're gonna run it up to temperature and let it do its thing. All right, well, this is the first start since putting everything back together. So let's hope it doesn't make any bad noises, but yeah, we'll see how we go. It also might not start because the battery's quite low. We'll see. Yep.
Well, she's fired up without making any bad noises, and it seems for now there are no leaks either, but the only way to know for sure is to take it for a drive.
All right, so we're gonna take the car for a bit of a drive to get it up to temp. Now, if you do read the instructions on the back of the radiator flush bottle, it just says pretty much to idle the car for 7 minutes to get it up to temp and then effectively turn it off after that. But again, speaking to the Patrol Apart boys, they actually recommended that I take the car for a proper drive to really, you know, let it do its thing inside the system. So I'm gonna go for a bit of a cruise. It should come up to temp relatively quick and then we'll keep driving. It's currently just popping over 40 degrees and I'm keeping an eye on things with the JRP 14-in-1, which makes it, you know, really easy to keep an eye on. All right, well, just doing the big hill coming out of town, and she's just got up to 76 degrees, which, if you remember, that's actually the exact temperature at which my new thermostat will open. So that now means that we've got full flow from our thermostat housing out through our top radiator hose and in through our radiator. So that should mean that any debris that it's hopefully picked up in the cooling system can pass out and hopefully is getting caught in our stocking. One thing that I'm glad I have, and I definitely recommend getting one if you don't, is an aftermarket water temp gauge. Obviously, I've got a water temp gauge built in with my JRP 14-in-1, as well as a bunch of other stuff. But it gives me confidence having it because when I look at my standard factory temp gauge, it's all over the place. Like, even now that the car is up to temperature, it's still reading like quite cold. So had I not had my aftermarket gauge, I wouldn't even know when the thing's up to temp. So yeah, if you don't have one, definitely recommend getting onto one. All right, so we're back from the test drive. All seemed to go well, but the test is gonna be when we drain this coolant flush fluid. What is the color of it? And also, have we got anything caught in our little stocking? So I'm gonna drain it while the car's still warm. I want all that sediment that's caught up and flying around in the coolant, I want that to come out before it settles. So even though the car's still warm, I'm gonna drain it while it's hot. And then we can let it cool right down before filling it back up again. Now, so far, all the coolant's actually coming out pretty clean. I did expect it to come out a bit browner, but the last thing to check is our stocking to see if it's caught any sediment from all that. So yeah, this will be an interesting one to see.
Take that off.
Oh, I can feel some stuff in there, I think. Let's go have a look on the bench. So if I turn this inside out, I mean, it's discolored, but there's not much in there. I don't know if you can see, there's a couple tiny little chunks of stuff, but bugger all. Well, there you go. I actually thought that might have caught a few more chunks and there was some more debris, but I guess that means that our cooling system isn't actually in as bad a nick as I thought it was gonna be. So yeah, so that's that. Anyway, now we're gonna let the car cool down and then we can move on to the last step, which is really, really important, and that is putting in coolant. Now, our coolant's job is to carry the heat out of our engine to our radiator where it can be cooled. Now, when it comes to actually filling up your cooling system, if you're in a pinch, you can use water, and I have done it myself to get myself out of trouble. But coolant actually has a bunch of additives in it which make it much, much better for your cooling system. Now, one of the major additives is glycol. This usually comes in two variants, which is either propylene or ethylene. And the purpose of the glycol is to lower the freezing point and raise the boiling point of your coolant. Now, this is great if you live in a cold climate with temperatures below freezing so your coolant doesn't freeze, or if you live in a warm climate where your car gets up to boiling temperature. This will prevent your coolant from actually boiling inside your cooling system. Now, the other main additive that you'll find in all coolants is actually corrosion inhibitors, and the purpose of these is to stop the metal that your engine and your cooling system is made up of from beginning to rust and corrode away. Now, these corrosion inhibitors in the coolant can actually deplete over time with age and just with the cycling of your engine with constant heat cycles. And once those corrosion inhibitors deplete, the water and glycol mixture left behind can actually become acidic, which starts to corrode your cooling system. So for that reason, it's really important that you replace your coolant when it's exceeded its lifespan.
Now, the next big question is, what color coolant do I need? Traditionally, green coolant was commonly used in older vehicles with cast iron engines, and red coolant in newer alloy engine vehicles. However, modern coolant colors are no longer standardized, and both red and green coolants can be suitable for alloy and cast iron engines. Coolants are now classified by their type and chemical formulation, such as type A or type B, and not by their color. The color is simply a dye, and it shouldn't be used as the main way to identify correct coolant. So instead, always make sure to check the coolant specification recommended by your vehicle manufacturer.
Now, I found the hardest thing in the past about filling your car with coolant is getting all of the air out, because if you get an airlock, it's going to prevent the coolant from flowing around your system completely and it'll overheat. So the first thing that's helpful is having one of these spill-free funnels, because you can actually fill it with coolant over the top of the radiator, and then when you run the car, any air that does come out will be quickly replaced by coolant. The second thing I like to do is I've actually over there in my top radiator hose, I have an adapter for my water temp gauges. I actually pulled one of the grub screws out of that, and that acts as a way that, being at the highest point, air can actually escape from there as I'm filling it with coolant from this side. So that makes it a lot easier to get all of the air out of the system.
Now another thing to note is your coolant mix ratio. Now you can buy coolant concentrate as well as coolant premix. If you use coolant concentrate, you just have to mix it with the correct amount of water to suit the capacity of your system.
So that's the car now filled with coolant. We've still got a bit of water sitting in our funnel as a header tank. So now pretty much the step will be to start the car, let it run, let it get up to temperature so that thermostat can open.
This time I'm letting the car come to operating temp just sitting in the shed idling, and this will give a good chance for any air bubbles to escape the system and be replaced by water.
Now we're just about to hit 76 degrees Celsius water temp, which is the same temperature that our thermostat should open. So this top hose here, it's been relatively cool, but once we hit 76, we should feel that warm coolant come through our top hose, then we know it's up to temperature.
The last step before a test drive is to give the car a rinse off with some fresh water, as any spilled coolant can be corrosive to your paintwork.
All right, well, time to take the car for a test drive. Pretty much just gonna do a bit of cruise up the road and that, try hit a few hills and see how it goes, pretty much. Like I mentioned earlier, just gonna be watching the temp gauge on the 14-in-1 like a hawk. Another thing I'm noticing too is that I can actually hear that new UFI fan. When it spins up, it must be pulling a lot of air, hence why the car's probably running so cool. So that thing's working a treat. So here's the usual test hill. We'll put our foot into it and see what happens. So I've only just hit 77 degrees at the top of the hill, which already that's pretty good. I mean, it is winter, but running cool so far, which is awesome. All right, so test drive was a huge success. Couldn't get the car to go over like 77 degrees, which is awesome. Obviously, have to wait for some warmer weather to really test it, but for now, it's looking really good. Also had a quick look over the car, no leaks from what I can see, so everything that we've stuck back together, all the gaskets, seals, new components, they've all sealed up properly, which is awesome. So that's the coolant overhaul done on the Patrol. It was a much needed job to do, but I think it was a great opportunity to go over the whole system. And hopefully you guys have learned something from this and maybe even taken home a few notes. If you are having a few heating or cooling issues of your own in your own car, it could be one of these things that's causing it. So it's worth going through, having a look and a check, and it might be a super simple thing to resolve, you never know. So that's gonna be the end for this one. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Make sure you leave a like and a comment, get subscribed as always, and we'll see you in the next one.